Evan Wells had never been the kind of man to expect adventure. He was a linguist and a cultural researcher, the kind of person who thrived in libraries and quiet laboratories. Space travel had been on his list, certainly, but mostly for observing alien languages and customs from a safe distance. Now, though, he was on the bridge of the Starship Odyssey, staring at the glowing surface of Thaurian with a mixture of awe and nerves. It was one of the most important missions of his career. First contact and cultural study, not diplomacy. At least, that's what he thought. Thaurian cities rose like crystal spires from the surface of a sea of golden sands. The planet's twin suns bathed everything in a warm, amber light that shimmered like molten metal. Ships like theirs were rare visitors, and Evan felt the weight of responsibility pressing against his ribs. He adjusted his jacket, a nervous habit he had whenever he faced something entirely unfamiliar. "You're nervous," said Captain Liera, the mission's commander. Her voice was calm, but her eyes sparkled with amusement. "It's just a ceremony, Evan. Bo, smile, don't mess up." Evan sighed and glanced down at the ceremonial garments the ship's crew had provided. The robes were simple enough, but the fabric felt strange, almost alive, shifting slightly as if sensing his unease. He tugged at the hem nervously. When they arrived at the Grand Hall of Thaurian, Evan's stomach twisted. The space was enormous, shaped like a circular amphitheater, with pillars that rose and twisted toward the ceiling like great vines. At the center stood the royal family and the highest-ranking diplomats. Princess Kelara, recently injured during a diplomatic visit, was seated slightly apart, her usual radiant posture slightly compromised by the support she had to lean on. Even from a distance, Evan could see the grace in her movement, the sharp intelligence in her gaze. The ceremony began with music unlike anything Evan had ever heard. The instruments were long tubes and strings that produced tones simultaneously melodic and vibrating, echoing in his chest in a way that made him shiver. The Thaurians moved with precise gestures, each motion a language unto itself. Evan tried to mirror them, counting silently in his head. Step, bow, gesture. Step, bow, gesture. Then came his turn. Evan approached the dais where Kelara sat. His mind was racing, trying to recall every instruction, every guide he had read on Thaurian customs. He bowed deeply, perhaps too deeply, and extended his hand, though in Thaurian culture hand gestures had subtle meanings he could never fully memorize in advance. He waited, hoping his actions conveyed respect. Kelara's eyes widened slightly. The hall went quiet, the music fading into stillness. Evan froze. Something had gone wrong, he knew it, though he had no idea what. The chief dignitary stepped forward, his voice like wind through crystal, sharp but calm. "By the laws of Thaurian," he intoned, "the visitor from Earth has unknowingly enacted the binding of rights." Kelara's eyes flicked to him, a mixture of surprise and something deeper he couldn't name. "The binding of rights," the dignitary continued, "requires that the offender be joined in ceremonial marriage to the honored one they have offended, in this case Princess Kelara, until the bond is fulfilled." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Kelara leaned slightly forward, her voice soft but firm. "It is what our customs demand," she said. "No one can break it, not even by human law." It was clear there was no way to argue, no loophole, no escape. The binding was done. He had accidentally married an alien princess. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. Evan followed Kelara's lead, mimicking her gestures as best he could. Every movement was precise, every step watched. He stumbled once, catching himself just in time, and felt Kelara's hand brush his arm. A small, almost imperceptible gesture, but it grounded him. After the ceremony, they were escorted to a private chamber, a space designed with a mixture of elegance and comfort. Evan took in the walls, which glimmered softly in the amber light, and the furniture, which seemed shaped to suit Kelara's form, a combination of function and artistry. She sat on a low divan, her legs supported carefully, and gestured for him to sit. "You seem overwhelmed," she said. Her voice was soft, yet commanding in a way that made him straighten instantly. "You have no idea," Evan admitted. "I study languages, cultures, everything, but this, I didn't even know the rules existed. Humans are unpredictable in their gestures, but your intent can be seen, even if your actions are flawed." She had been hurt protecting her people, and now he was part of her life in a way he had never anticipated. I'm sorry," he said again, unsure what else to say. "I didn't mean to cause this to you." "My name, how do you know it?" Evan felt the weight of her gaze and the enormity of his situation. He had come to study a culture, to observe and report, but now he was an active part of it. The responsibility was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. "I don't even know where to start," he admitted. "You start by learning," Kilara said, "by observing, listening, respecting, and by understanding that mistakes are as much a teacher as success." Every word she spoke carried weight, and Evan took careful mental notes, determined not to falter again. By evening, he was exhausted but more aware. He had made a dozen small mistakes, each corrected with patience and precision. Kilara's guidance was strict but fair, and he realized that she had a quiet strength that made him feel both protected and challenged. When dinner arrived, it was a communal experience, an array of alien dishes presented with colors and textures that defied earthly comparison. Evan hesitated before trying anything, fearful of offending. Kilara watched him with interest, and then, with a small nod, she encouraged him to take a bite. The flavors were unlike anything he had tasted, sweet, tangy, and earthy all at once, yet balanced perfectly. Evan felt a small thrill. Even here, in the strangest situation of his life, there was wonder to be found. "You are doing well," Kilara said, noticing his reaction. "You are beginning to see, this world is strange not because it is difficult, but because it is different. That difference is a gift." Evan sat at the edge of the chamber, staring out at the view, while Kilara rested nearby. He thought of Earth, of libraries and quiet labs, of the simple life he had once known. And yet he felt a spark of something new, something daring, something alive. He was married by accident to a wounded alien princess, thrust into a world of rituals and expectations. He had no idea what the future held. And yet, as he watched Kilara adjust her brace and look toward the moons, he felt a strange certainty. He could learn, he could adapt, and somehow he could survive, and maybe even thrive, in this alien world. The stars above twinkled silently, and for the first time in his life, Evan felt that he was not just observing history. He was part of it. Evan woke to the soft glow of Thaurian's twin moons filtering through the tall, crystalline windows. Sleep had been uneasy. The weight of the previous day's events pressed heavily on him. He sat up slowly, muscles stiff from unfamiliar bedding, and glanced at Kilara. She was already awake, adjusting her brace with careful precision. Even in rest, she exuded a quiet strength that both intimidated and inspired him. "You slept well," she said without turning, her voice calm, almost teasing. "Considering the circumstances, that is." Well as anyone could, I guess." He paused. "I'm still not sure how to act around you. Every gesture seems wrong." Observation, intention, patience. Simple words, yet carrying a world of meaning. Today, he would begin learning. Kilara rose and gestured for him to follow. "Come," she said. "There is much to see, and the first lessons cannot be given in a chamber." Each hallway seemed alive, walls glimmering faintly with a soft, shifting light. Statues of historical figures, heroes of Thaurian and abstract forms that defied earthly logic lined the passageways. Evan could barely take it all in. "Your people value history in a very different way," he said, finally breaking the silence. "Back home, we have museums and books. Here, it feels like the past lives with you, moving in the air around you." The air was fragrant with scents unfamiliar to Evan, sweet and sharp at the same time. Water flowed gently through crystal channels, producing a melodic sound that calmed him instantly. "Your first lesson," Kilara said, "is understanding attention. Humans often act, react, speak without noticing the effect on others. Thaurian ways require awareness. Watch. Not just words, but tone, gesture, presence. Observation is the first step. Patience and intention come next. We will practice daily. This will help you navigate not just customs, but relationships." She taught him how to bow correctly, how to position his hands, even how to hold his eyes to show respect without offense. Each mistake was corrected gently, each small success celebrated. Evan found himself laughing more than he expected, sometimes at his own awkwardness, sometimes at the strange customs that seemed so alien yet strangely logical. But the lessons were not limited to etiquette. Kilara involved him in practical matters, reviewing reports, observing political councils, and even helping in planning ceremonies. She encouraged him to contribute ideas from Earth, which often surprised the Thaurian advisors. Evan discovered that human creativity, curiosity, and adaptability were valued, even respected, when applied thoughtfully. One evening, after an exhausting day of practice, Evan helped Kilara adjust her brace. She winced slightly, and he paused, unsure how much pressure to apply. "Gentle," she said, reading his hesitation. "You are learning, that is what matters. Not by tradition, but by your presence. You see things differently, that is a strength. She in turn seemed to see the effort and sincerity in him, recognizing his willingness to adapt and learn. One morning, Kilara invited him to join her in the archives, a vast chamber containing the recorded histories, philosophies, and art of Thaurian. Evan's eyes widened at the endless rows of crystalline slabs, each glowing faintly with encoded information. These are our memories, Kilara explained. Our knowledge of the past is stored here not just as words but as experiences. To understand our people, you must understand their history. He realized that Thaurian history celebrated wisdom, ingenuity, and foresight rather than conquest. You see, Kilara asked, conflict is not always about force. Often it is about understanding, adaptation, and problem-solving. Humans have a similar strength. You will find it appreciated here if used wisely. Gesture, thought, action. Evan felt the pressure, aware that one misstep could undo his progress. Kilara supported him, often intervening subtly, teaching him to navigate politics as well as culture. One afternoon, they visited a public space, a bustling market filled with Thaurian citizens. Evan noticed how carefully Kilara moved, how she responded to subtle cues from merchants and passers-by. He tried to mimic her, bowing, smiling, and speaking with careful tone. A vendor offered a gift, a small luminescent crystal. Evan hesitated, then bowed, accepted, and offered a small token from Earth in return. Kilara watched, pleased. You are learning the art of interaction, she said quietly. It is more than etiquette. It is respect expressed through understanding and consideration. He found himself seeking her opinion, appreciating her guidance, and noticing the smallest details about her. The way her eyes lit up when explaining a concept, the quiet patience with which she corrected mistakes, and the subtle humor she allowed herself in moments of privacy. Yet he was cautious, aware of their unusual circumstances and her vulnerability. Kilara, too, began to open up in ways she had not with others. She spoke of her injury, not with sorrow but with matter-of-fact acceptance. She shared glimpses of her childhood, her training, and her responsibilities as a princess. Evan listened, fascinated, realizing that the woman he had accidentally married was also his greatest teacher and guide. One evening, they stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The twin moons reflected in the crystal towers, bathing everything in silver and gold. Evan hesitated, then spoke. I never imagined that I would be here, that I would be learning all this, and that I would care so much about someone like you. You are not just here because of a mistake, Evan. You are here because you have chosen to learn, to respect, to adapt. That is why you matter. The accidental marriage that had terrified him was transforming into a bond built on trust, understanding, and shared experience. In the days that followed, their lessons continued, but so did their connection. Evan began to anticipate Kilara's gestures, understand her subtle cues, and even offer suggestions that she found valuable. Their conversations grew longer, more personal, and filled with laughter and curiosity. Then came a challenge neither had expected. A festival was approaching, celebrating the planet's unity and progress. As part of the ceremonial events, Evan was to participate in a public demonstration alongside Kilara. It required both precision and understanding of Thaurian culture, an opportunity to prove not just his skill but his bond with her. Evan practiced tirelessly, sometimes faltering, sometimes excelling. Kilara guided him patiently, correcting mistakes with gentle firmness. As the festival day approached, he realized that he no longer feared mistakes. He feared disappointing her, not the culture itself. When the day arrived, the demonstration unfolded perfectly. The crowd watched as Evan and Kilara moved with grace, their gestures precise and harmonious. A wave of approval spread through the spectators, some murmuring in surprise at the Earthlings' understanding. Evan felt pride, not in himself alone, but in the shared effort that had brought them to this moment. That evening, after the festival, they returned to the palace, exhausted but exhilarated. Evan watched Kilara laugh softly at a humorous memory from the day, feeling a warmth spread through him. He realized that what had begun as a terrifying mistake, the accidental marriage, had grown into something extraordinary. He had learned not only about a new culture, but about patience, understanding, and the power of adaptation. And he had learned that connection could grow in the most unexpected ways, through effort, respect, and empathy. As they stood together on the balcony once more, gazing at the twin moons, Evan knew that the challenges ahead would be many, but so would the discoveries. He felt a sense of anticipation, excitement, and quiet joy. Thaurian was no longer alien. It was a world in which he had a place, alongside Kelara, learning, growing, and becoming more than he had ever imagined. For the first time since his arrival, Evan felt at home, not in the familiar, but in the unfamiliar. And that, he realized, was the greatest lesson of all. The days following the festival passed in a blur of preparation and reflection. Evan had learned much about Thaurian culture, but the coming week promised his greatest challenge yet. Princess Kelara had received an invitation for a rare ceremonial council, a gathering that occurred only once every decade. Attendance by an outsider was unheard of, but Evan had been invited as her partner, the result of the accidental marriage that had begun their unusual journey. Evan awoke early that morning, staring out at the twin moons. His stomach fluttered nervously. This council was not a festival or a practice session. It was the heart of Thaurian governance, where the most delicate decisions were made. And he, a human, would be in the center of it. Kelara entered the room quietly, dressed in flowing ceremonial robes that shimmered with light as she moved. Evan felt a familiar mixture of awe and nervousness. He had grown accustomed to her presence, yet every time she appeared before him in ceremonial dress, the weight of her dignity reminded him how different their worlds were. "You are ready," she said simply, though her eyes measured him carefully. "Do not worry about perfection, worry about sincerity. That is what matters most." "I can do that." Evan felt the hum of anticipation in the air, a collective tension that made every sound sharper, every movement more deliberate. Kelara guided him to stand beside her. "Remember," she whispered, "observe, listen, and act only when it is appropriate. Your presence is a sign of trust, not an attempt to lead. Let them see your respect." He had spent weeks learning Thaurian gestures, tones, and customs. He would follow her lead, contribute carefully, and above all, remain attentive. The council began with ceremonial greetings, each dignitary bowing in complex patterns. Evan mimicked Kelara's movements, bowing and gesturing as he had practiced countless times. He noticed subtle shifts in posture, slight changes in tone, and small facial expressions that communicated more than words ever could. The first discussion involved a territorial dispute between two distant colonies of Thaurian. Kelara presented the issue, her words precise and calm, acknowledging both sides. Evan noticed how her tone softened certain statements, how her gestures invited understanding rather than dominance. It was a delicate dance, one that required intelligence, patience, and emotional awareness. When Kelara glanced at him, Evan understood his cue. He stepped forward cautiously, offering a suggestion based on a problem-solving principle from Earth. "If resources were shared temporarily," he proposed, "both colonies could benefit immediately while a long-term solution is negotiated. It reduces tension without disregarding tradition." She spoke, weaving his idea into her argument seamlessly, demonstrating the human perspective without diminishing its value. A murmur of approval rippled through the council. Dignitaries exchanged glances, some nodding in surprise. Evan realized that humans, through thoughtfulness, creativity, and empathy, could indeed contribute meaningfully, even in the most formal and alien environments. After hours of discussion, the council concluded. The outcome was not merely a resolution of the dispute, but an acknowledgement of the potential for collaboration between humans and Thaurians. Evan felt a quiet pride, not in himself alone, but in the bond he had built with Kelara, a bond grounded in trust, understanding, and shared effort. The journey back to the palace was filled with reflective silence. Evan felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Kelara remained quiet, though her hand brushed lightly against his arm from time to time, a gentle reassurance. That evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, Evan spoke hesitantly. "Kelara, I never imagined that I could contribute something meaningful here. I thought I would only observe, learn, and avoid mistakes. But today," he paused, searching for words, "today I felt like I belonged, that my presence mattered. That is a strength Thaurian society has yet to fully recognize, and you have shown it. Do not forget that." Kelara guided him, teaching him when to lead, when to follow, and when to observe silently. When the day arrived, the plaza was filled with thousands of Thaurian citizens. The air shimmered with anticipation, the twin suns casting long, golden shadows. Evan and Kelara took their positions at the center, the culmination of weeks of preparation. The demonstration began. Every movement, every gesture, every tone was deliberate. Evan moved with confidence, recalling lessons from Kelara and the weeks of practice. He watched her closely, anticipating her cues, responding instinctively. Together, they created a harmony that the crowd recognized immediately. It was not perfect, but it was sincere, precise, and respectful, a human and a Thaurian moving in unison. When the demonstration ended, the crowd erupted into applause. It was not loud, but it was profound, a wave of recognition and acceptance that washed over Evan. He looked at Kelara, her eyes bright with approval, and felt a surge of joy. They had done it together. Later, in the quiet of the palace, Kelara led him to the balcony. The twin moons rose over the city, casting silver and amber light across the crystal towers. Evan felt a calm he had never known, a sense of belonging and purpose. "You have grown," Kelara said softly, standing beside him. "Not just in understanding Thaurian customs, but in understanding people, ourselves, each other, and the bond we share. You have shown that humans, though different, can be trusted, respected, and valued. Not just ritual, but understanding, trust, and partnership. That is the path forward." Over the following weeks, Evan continued to integrate into Thaurian society. He engaged in projects that combined human innovation with Thaurian tradition, helping communities solve challenges in ways that honored both cultures. Kelara remained his guide, teacher, and companion, their partnership deepening with every shared experience. One evening, as they watched the twin moons rise once again, Evan spoke quietly. "Kelara, I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you. Whatever challenges, whatever surprises, together. Together, humans and Thaurians will learn from each other, grow together, and create a future built on understanding and respect. You are part of that future now." It had been the doorway to a world in which humans could thrive through intellect, empathy, and adaptability. He had learned to see beyond differences, to respect and value another culture, and to find his place within it. The palace was quiet, but alive with the subtle hum of energy that ran through Thaurian society. Evan felt the rhythm of it, the pulse of life and knowledge that flowed through the halls, the gardens, and the people. He knew that challenges would come, as they always did, but he also knew that he was no longer alone. He had Kelara beside him, a bond forged through shared effort, trust, and understanding. As the twin moons reflected on the crystal towers, Evan and Kelara stood hand in hand, looking out over a world that had once seemed alien, intimidating, and unapproachable. Now it felt like home, not because it was familiar, but because they had built a connection that transcended differences, celebrated learning, and embraced growth. And in that moment, Evan understood something profound. Humans were capable of greatness not through force or dominance, but through understanding, adaptation, and empathy. That was the true power of their species, and in Thaurian it was finally recognized. He looked at Kelara, her eyes bright with curiosity, strength, and warmth, and felt a quiet certainty. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, not as strangers from different worlds, but as partners, equals, and friends. The moons rose higher, casting their gentle light across the city, and Evan knew that this was only the beginning. Together, they would explore, learn, and thrive, bridging worlds and cultures with the simple yet profound power of understanding and connection.